Here's the cleaned-up narration, stripped of timestamps and chapter markers, with light polish while keeping the length and story intact. My name is Jenny Bird, and I'm 27 years old. I worked as a waitress at a restaurant called Belleview on 5th Street, wearing a black apron with a small brass tag pinned to my chest that spelled my name in careful cursive. Every night I refilled water glasses, memorized specials, and smiled at strangers who never once imagined that I might own the very building they sat in. That night, my father had insisted on a family dinner at Bellevue, and I hadn't argued, because some small part of me still wanted him to notice what I had built. He arrived in a gray suit that cost more than my monthly rent used to be, my mother trailing behind him in pearls, both of them settling into the corner booth like royalty visiting a peasant's tavern. I approached their table the way I approached every table, pad in hand, pen ready, because that was the role I had chosen to play, for reasons they would never understand. My father looked up at me, barely glancing past the menu, and said the words loud enough for the tables around us to hear, "Poor trash waitress." He said it straight to my face without hesitation, without softening it, as if the words cost him nothing and meant even less. My mother smirked beside him, her lips curling in that familiar way she had when she agreed with him but didn't want to say it outright, going along with him the way she always did, the way she had my entire childhood. I stood there with my notepad trembling slightly in my hand, not because I was hurt in the way they expected, but because I had spent 3 years building something they refused to see. They mocked my job, my life, right there inside the restaurant I had built from nothing, unaware that every chair they sat in, every plate they would soon eat from, every light fixture glowing above their heads belonged to me. I had bought Bellevue with money I saved working double shifts as a line cook, years before I ever owned it, money I hid from them because they would have found a way to take it, to control it, to tell me I was doing it wrong. I had renovated the place myself in the months after I signed the papers, sanding down the old bar top with my own hands, choosing the paint colors, hiring a small staff of people who needed a second chance the way I once had. And now, 3 years later, I stood in front of my own parents, disguised in an apron, absorbing insults about a job I didn't actually have, because the real truth was something I hadn't yet found the courage to say. My father kept talking, unaware that his voice was carrying to the table beside them, where an older man in a navy blazer sat alone, nursing a glass of red wine, his eyes flicking toward our booth with quiet interest. "This is what happens when a girl refuses real work," my father said, cutting into the bread basket as if it personally owed him something. "Waiting tables, wasting her degree. And for what?" My mother nodded along, adding something about how disappointed they were, how they had expected more from me, how their friends' children were doctors and lawyers while their daughter carried plates. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that arguing with them was like arguing with a wall that enjoyed watching you tire yourself out. Instead, I took their order, wrote it down carefully, and walked back toward the kitchen with my jaw tight and my hands steady, because losing composure in my own restaurant was not something I was willing to do. Not for them, not for anyone. Behind me, I heard my father mutter something else to my mother, something about hoping I would wake up someday and get a real career, and I let the kitchen door swing shut behind me before he could see my face change. I leaned against the steel counter for a moment, breathing slowly, watching my sous chef plate a dish of seared salmon without looking up, used to my occasional retreats to the back when family visited. I thought about walking back out there and telling them everything, the deed with my name on it, the business license framed in my office upstairs, the years of sacrifice they knew nothing about. But something held me back, some old instinct that told me the moment wasn't right yet, that the truth would land harder if it came from somewhere else, from someone they didn't expect. I picked up their appetizers when they were ready and carried them back out, forcing a professional smile onto my face as I set the plates down in front of them. That was when the man in the navy blazer at the next table set down his wine glass, leaned slightly toward our booth, and looked directly at my father with an expression I couldn't quite read. He glanced around the restaurant slowly, taking in the chandeliers, the hand-painted mural on the far wall, the exposed brick I had chosen myself, before he finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying enough weight to silence the table beside him. "Who owns this place?" he asked. The words hung in the air for a moment, simple and unassuming, but something in the way he asked it made my father's fork pause halfway to his mouth. My mother's smile faltered slightly, uncertain why a stranger's question would matter to them at all. I stood frozen near the edge of their booth, plate still balanced on my forearm, feeling as though the entire room had gone still, watching the stranger in the navy blazer wait patiently for an answer nobody at our table could give. My father cleared his throat and said he had no idea, that he was simply here for dinner with his wife and daughter, gesturing vaguely toward me as if I were a piece of furniture rather than the person who signed the rent checks that fed him. The stranger nodded slowly, then turned his attention toward me, his eyes moving from my apron to my name tag to my face, studying me with a strange kind of respect that confused everyone else at the table. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner," he said, addressing my father now, "but I've been coming to Bellevue every week for the past year, and I've never once seen the owner in person. I was hoping tonight might finally be the night." My mother let out a small, nervous laugh, saying surely the owner was some businessman upstairs in an office somewhere, certainly not standing in front of them holding a tray. The stranger's eyes flicked back to me, and for the first time, something like a smile touched the corner of his mouth, as though he already knew something the rest of the table didn't. I set the tray down slowly on the service stand beside me, feeling my heartbeat pick up, feeling 3 years of silence finally reaching its breaking point inside my chest. "I own this restaurant," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be, cutting cleanly through the noise of the dining room. My father's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without any words coming out. The stranger, who I would later learn was named Desmond Okafor, a food columnist who had been quietly writing about Bellevue's rise for a local magazine, simply nodded, as if this confirmed something he had suspected all along from the quality of the cooking and the care in every small detail of the space. "I thought so," he said. "The attention in this place doesn't come from someone who's just passing through." My father's face moved through several colors in the span of a few seconds, landing somewhere between disbelief and a shame he clearly didn't know how to process in front of a stranger. He tried to recover, forcing a laugh, saying I must be joking, that I was probably just helping a friend out or covering a shift for someone, anything except the truth sitting plainly in front of him. I didn't laugh. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the small leather folder I kept there for exactly this kind of moment, the one holding my business card, the one that read Jenny Bird, owner and founder, Bellevue Restaurant, and I placed it gently on the table beside his bread plate. My mother picked it up with shaking hands, reading it twice, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less humiliating. I told them then, calmly, without raising my voice, about the 3 years of double shifts as a line cook before this place was even mine. About the nights I slept in my car outside the building because I couldn't afford both rent and the down payment I was saving. About the sacrifices they never noticed because they were too busy being disappointed in a version of me that never actually existed. I told them I hadn't said anything until now because some part of me had wanted them to be proud of who I already was, not who I had become, and that tonight had made it painfully clear that pride was never something they were capable of giving without proof stamped on paper. My father tried to speak, tried to construct some kind of apology out of the wreckage of the last few minutes, but the words came out clumsy and small, nothing like the confident insult he had thrown at me so easily less than an hour earlier. My mother reached for my hand, and for a moment I let her hold it, though something inside me had already shifted, some quiet understanding that respect earned through humiliation was never respect at all. Desmond raised his wineglass slightly in my direction, a small, private gesture of acknowledgement, before returning to his meal as if he hadn't just changed the entire trajectory of my evening. I excused myself from the booth, telling my parents that dinner was on the house tonight, a kindness I gave not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to walk away from that table on my own terms, standing taller than I had in years. As I walked back toward the kitchen, my staff glanced up at me with quiet, knowing looks, having heard enough through the swinging doors to understand that something important had just happened. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. I felt something steadier than that, something that had been building in me since the day I signed the deed to this building, a quiet certainty that I no longer needed anyone's permission to be proud of what I had built.